We got into the emergency room, and there were hundreds of people wounded on the floor. It was literally a war scene. People were laying on the floor. There were not enough beds to put people on. And people were brought in from all over Lebanon. There were Israeli soldiers wounded in the war brought in from Lebanon. There were a terrorist brought in. There were Muslim Lebanese brought in, Christian Lebanese brought in. Everyone was treated together, and I couldn't believe my eyes. I said to myself, I can understand why they are treating me. I am their ally. I am their friend. I'm a Christian. But why the heck are they treating the Muslims and the Palestinians, fully knowing that these guys will slit their throat in 30 seconds if they get a chance? Little did I know about the values and the character of the Israeli people. The doctors treated everyone according to their injury. They did not differentiate. They did not see nationality. They did not see religion. They did not see color. They did not see background. They could care less. They never asked me if I was a Christian or a Muslim. The doctor treated my mother before he treated the Israeli soldier laying next to her. I couldn't believe my eyes. They took my mother to the 4th floor of the hospital. And we were there 5 minutes. They had gotten her in. 2 other Lebanese ladies, Muslim ladies, were brought in that morning in the same room. And they put my mother in the bed between the 2 of them. And we were just sitting there. Barely I had just sat on my chair. And I heard all this commotion outside our window. And people were running from the nurse's station through our room and out to the balcony to see what was happening. And I walked out to the balcony to see what was that noise. And 2 Israeli helicopters had just landed, bringing in people from Lebanon, soldiers, Israeli soldiers wounded in the war. And I remember standing at that balcony, looking down at that scene, feeling brokenhearted, feeling sick to my stomach, feeling humiliated, feeling embarrassed, feeling out of place. After all these people are wounded because of the war with my country, I felt ashamed. I didn't make eye contact with the people standing next to me, and the balcony was full on both sides. It was full with families of Israeli soldiers who were wounded, who were in the hospital. And I didn't want to make eye contact with anyone because I did not know how they're going to react to me. And I continued looking down. And out of nowhere, I feel this tapping on my shoulder. And I look to my side, and an Israeli nurse was standing next to me. And she looks at me with the most beautiful green eyes. And she looks at me and she says, "You aren't you here, aren't you?" And I said, "Yes, I am. We just came into this room. They just brought in my mother." And she must have seen the fear, the sadness, the uncertainty in my eyes. And without skipping a beat, that lady puts her arm around me and she just hugs me. And she said, "Don't worry, everything will be just fine. We'll take good care of your mother. And if you need anything, just call my name. My name is Leah." And for the first time in my life, I experienced compassion. I experienced civilization. I experienced such a level of respect, such a level of humanity. I began crying. I began sobbing in her arm. I didn't know how to react because for the first time in my life, I experienced love, acceptance from what is supposed to be people that we are at war with. I realized she had something that my culture will not be able to give. I experienced a human quality that I knew for a fact my culture did not have to give, especially in such a time as the wartime we were in. I spent 22 days in the hospital in Itzfat. 22 days where I became friends with the people, the mothers and the fathers and the sisters of Israeli wounded soldiers in the hospital. Those days changed my life. It showed me a part of Israel that I didn't know. It showed me the compassion, the love, the humanity of the Israeli people. I remember looking down and thinking to myself, if I was a Jew standing on the 4th floor of a hospital, I'll be thrown down, lynched and thrown down to my death, as shouts of joy, of celebration will echo through the hospital and down the surrounding streets. Who could ever forget the image of the Palestinian man standing in the window with blood dripping down his hands after lynching 2 Israeli soldiers that got lost in Ramallah a few years ago? As the mob were lynching them. and they were proudly rejoicing and laughing. What a contrast. I could not believe those days I spent in the hospital. I realized the Israelis had something even I did not have. They were able to love and forgive their enemy, the Palestinians, in a way I wasn't able to. And I was a Christian who was supposed to love like Jesus taught. I became friends with the doctors. I started translating to the doctors because I spoke a little English. Actually, that was the first time I spoke English. Here's a story. Many people ask me, how did you learn your English? Very interesting question. I never studied English at school, but I practiced it in the hospital when my mother was wounded. When I was in the bomb shelter, we finally, to hear the news after many years, we learned how to operate a black and white television on a car battery. And my father used to plug the car battery into the TV so we can watch the evening news. And if there was any charge left in the battery, you know, every Wednesday night we watched The Love Boat. And every Thursday night I watched Dallas. And I wanted so badly to learn English that, you know, we have subtitles, and they would write subtitles on the bottom. So if watching The Love Boat, two people looking at each other, a guy asks a girl something, and she says, maybe. I knew that maybe meant whatever they wrote on the bottom of the screen in Arabic. So I started writing it on my hand with ink. And because we barely had water to drink, let alone to shower, we took showers once every 2 weeks. I would build a huge vocabulary. This is how I learned English. True. So when I got to the hospital, and the doctor saw that here's this Lebanese teenager, and they wanted my help translating to other teenagers and other people, you know, wounded in the hospital. And I just spoke, hey, how are you? You know, they said, oh, she speaks English. So I started translating, and that's really what kicked my English up. And this is what got me practicing the English language. And here I am today. So thank you. Where there's a will, there's a way. I wanted so badly to come to America, even back then, because watching The Love Boat, you know, I never thought that actually that was real, that people did go on cruises, that was like fantasy land. But I wanted so badly to come to the United States. I knew in order for me to better myself, to be able to meet Americans, I had to speak the English language. And I realized no matter what it takes, I have got to learn English because that is my ticket out of Lebanon. This is how I'm going to be able to get a job. And this is how I started writing and studying on candlelights in the bomb shelter. But it not only helped me in my profession, but who would have known that God will use all those years where I learned English, so I will be able to work as a liaison between the wounded people in the hospital and the doctors, and be able to walk around with them and hold little children's hands, and be able to ask them and translate to the doctors and serve and fulfill their needs. God has a plan, and God has a purpose for every single thing that happens in our lives. Believe it. God today is preparing you for something in your life. No matter what it is, you do not know it at the time being, but you will discover it later on in life, because nothing in our life happens by chance, but for a reason. I spent 22 days in the hospital where I became like family members to the doctors, to the nurses, many of the wounded people. One lady in particular, Rena Potashnik, became like my surrogate mother.